Something has been trying to get your attention for a long time now, and deep down, you already know it. That strange feeling you keep brushing off, the heaviness in your chest when the room gets quiet, the moments late at night when your thoughts suddenly grow louder than everything around you, none of it is random. You've tried to explain it away. Stress. Exhaustion. Maybe just another rough season. But this feels different, doesn't it? Because even when you smile around other people, even when you keep going through your daily routine like everything is fine, there's still something unsettled inside you. Like part of you knows something serious is happening beneath the surface of your life. Maybe it started a few months ago. Maybe longer. Small things began shifting in ways you couldn't explain. Conversations changed. Certain people slowly disappeared from your life. Opportunities that once seemed perfect suddenly collapsed at the last second. Plans you were sure about stopped moving forward no matter how hard you tried. And every time something fell apart, you blamed yourself first. You told yourself you weren't working hard enough. Maybe you missed your chance. Maybe everyone else was moving ahead while you stayed stuck in the same place, waiting for answers that never came. But lately, the silence has started to feel heavier than usual. Especially during those quiet nights when you're lying awake staring at the ceiling with the glow of your phone lighting up the room, scrolling through old messages, old memories, wondering how your life ended up feeling this distant from the person you thought you'd become by now. You keep asking yourself why nothing seems to work the way it used to. Why every door closes right when you get close. Why your spirit feels tired even after a full night's sleep. And the hardest part is that nobody around you fully sees it. They see you showing up to work. They hear you say, "I'm fine." They watch you laugh at the right moments. But they don't see the version of you sitting alone in a parking lot after a long day, gripping the steering wheel for 10 minutes before driving home because something inside you feels too overwhelmed to move. They don't hear the thoughts you carry in silence. The fear that maybe you've been forgotten. The fear that maybe the waiting meant nothing at all. But what if the silence was never punishment? What if the delays were not there to destroy your future, but to stop you from stepping into something that would have broken you even more? Because there's a reason this feeling keeps returning to you. There's a reason certain things never worked out no matter how badly you wanted them to. And there's a reason you're hearing these words right now at this exact moment in your life. You may not fully understand it yet, but something inside you is beginning to wake up. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Slowly. Like the first light entering a dark room before sunrise. And maybe that's why everything has felt so serious lately. Because while you thought your life was falling apart, something deeper may have been pulling you away from the very thing that was never meant for you in the first place. For a while now, you have been carrying a quiet kind of exhaustion that nobody else seems to notice. Not the kind that comes from missing sleep for one night or working a long shift, but the kind that settles deep inside you after months of disappointment, silence, and trying to hold yourself together while everything around you keeps changing. Every morning starts the same way. You wake up hoping today will feel different, hoping maybe this will finally be the day something shifts, the day the pressure lifts, the day the confusion starts making sense. But instead, you move through the same routines with the same questions following you everywhere you go. Even the smallest things feel heavier now. Driving home feels longer than it used to. Walking into your apartment feels colder somehow. You set your keys down on the kitchen counter, glance at your phone hoping to see a message that never comes, then stand there in silence listening to the hum of the refrigerator because the quiet feels almost too loud lately. And what makes it harder is that nobody really understands what is happening inside you. They think you are just stressed. They think you are overthinking things. But deep down, you know this feeling goes beyond stress. Because it is not just your circumstances that changed. Something inside you changed too. You started noticing little moments that stayed with you longer than they should. Like driving past a place you have not thought about in years and suddenly remembering who you used to be before life became so heavy. Or waking up in the middle of the night for no clear reason, your room completely still, your chest tight with emotion you cannot explain. There are moments when it almost feels like your spirit is trying to tell you something your mind has not fully understood yet. But instead of listening to that feeling, you keep trying to fix everything logically. You tell yourself if you work harder, stay positive, or push through a little longer, eventually things will fall back into place. Yet somehow the harder you force things, the more resistance you feel. It happened again recently, did it not? Another plan fell apart right when you started believing in it. Another conversation left you feeling unseen. Another opportunity disappeared without explanation. And afterward, you sat there replaying every detail in your head, wondering what you did wrong this time. That is the part nobody sees. The constant second-guessing. The way you blame yourself for every closed door. The way you quietly wonder if maybe life is moving forward for everyone except you. Last Thursday night, after sitting in traffic for nearly 40 minutes under cold rain and dim brake lights stretching for miles ahead, you pulled into the parking lot outside your building and just sat there with the engine running. You were too emotionally drained to even walk inside. The dashboard clock read 11:14 p.m. and for a moment you stared through the windshield at the rain sliding down the glass while a strange thought crossed your mind. What if all these delays are not random? What if something has been stopping certain things from happening for a reason you cannot see yet? Because when you look back honestly, some of the things you cried over months ago now seem different. Some people leaving your life protected your peace more than they damaged it. Some opportunities that disappeared would have pulled you into places that no longer fit who you are becoming. But you still have not fully accepted that yet. Part of you is still grieving the version of life you thought you were supposed to have by now. There is a certain kind of loneliness that only appears when your life looks completely normal from the outside. It is the kind where people assume you are doing fine because you still show up every day. You still answer messages. You still go to work, pay bills, smile politely at strangers in grocery store lines, and laugh at the right moments during conversations. But inside, something feels disconnected, like you have been moving through life on autopilot while quietly carrying a weight nobody else can see. And lately, that feeling has been growing stronger. You started noticing it in the smallest moments. Standing in your kitchen holding a cup of coffee that went cold 20 minutes ago because your mind drifted somewhere else again. Driving through familiar streets at night while feeling strangely detached from everything around you, as if your body kept moving but your spirit stayed stuck somewhere behind. Even music does not hit the same anymore. Songs that once comforted you now remind you of parts of yourself you barely recognize. You keep wondering when exactly everything started feeling this heavy. Maybe it was not one moment at all. Maybe it happened slowly, over time, through disappointment after disappointment, until one day you realized you had become emotionally tired in a way rest could not fix. The hardest part is that you have tried so hard to keep believing things would eventually turn around. You told yourself to stay patient. To trust the process. To keep going no matter how confusing life became. But after enough unanswered prayers, enough missed opportunities, enough nights spent lying awake replaying old conversations in your head, even hope starts feeling exhausting. Last Sunday evening, you sat alone on your couch while rain tapped softly against the windows, your television playing quietly in the background even though you were not really watching it. Your phone rested beside you, screen dark, and for a second you caught yourself hoping someone would reach out first. Not because you needed attention, but because you wanted proof that you still mattered to someone without always being the one trying to hold everything together. That feeling stayed with you longer than you expected. Because deep down, you are tired of carrying invisible pain while pretending you are okay. Tired of acting strong when part of you feels emotionally worn thin. And there is another truth you rarely admit out loud. Somewhere along the way, you started feeling disappointed with yourself. Not because you failed completely, but because life did not become what you imagined it would by now. You thought you would feel more secure, more certain, more fulfilled. Instead, there are nights when you sit in silence wondering if you somehow missed your moment, missed your purpose, missed the version of life you were meant to step into. But what if the version of your life that fell apart was never the real destination? What if the confusion you are living through right now is not proof that you are failing, but proof that something inside you is slowly being redirected? Because if you are honest, some things that disappeared from your life took chaos with them when they left. Some relationships drained more from you than they ever gave back. Some opportunities looked perfect on the surface but left you feeling uneasy deep down. You ignored those feelings at the time because you were afraid of losing what you worked so hard for. But now, sitting alone in these quiet moments, you are beginning to realize something uncomfortable. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that not every closed door was your enemy. Some doors closed because your spirit recognized danger before your mind was willing to admit it. The strange part is that your mind keeps trying to return to things your spirit quietly moved away from months ago. You still revisit old memories while driving home at night. You still wonder what would have happened if certain people stayed, if certain conversations ended differently, if certain opportunities had not disappeared right when you finally felt hopeful again. And every time your thoughts drift back there, you feel the same ache in your chest because part of you still believes your life would be better if those doors had remained open. But lately, something has started shifting inside you, even if you cannot fully explain it yet. Small moments keep interrupting your normal routines in ways that feel strangely personal. Like last Tuesday morning when you stopped at the gas station before work, exhausted from barely sleeping again, and while pumping gas you suddenly noticed the sunrise reflecting across the windows of the empty storefront beside you. For a few seconds, everything became still. The traffic noise faded. The pressure in your mind softened. And without understanding why, you felt this overwhelming sense that you needed to slow down and pay attention to your life differently. Not because everything was finally getting better, but because something hidden beneath all this confusion was beginning to reveal itself little by little. The problem is that you have spent so long trying to force clarity that you no longer trust quiet feelings anymore. You trust proof, results, plans, timelines. You keep waiting for some obvious answer to appear so you can finally relax and move forward again. But the deeper truth may not arrive all at once. It may come through patterns instead. Through moments you almost ignored. Through situations that did not make sense until much later. Because if you really think about it, there were warnings you felt before certain things collapsed. Tiny moments your spirit hesitated even while your mind kept pushing forward. That relationship that drained your peace long before it ended. That opportunity that looked perfect on paper but left you feeling restless every night. That decision you almost made even though something deep inside you kept whispering not yet. You ignored those feelings because you were afraid of losing progress. Afraid of disappointment. Afraid that if you stopped chasing what you wanted, nothing else would ever come. But now, sitting alone in the quiet aftermath of everything that changed, you are beginning to see those moments differently. Maybe your life was not falling apart as randomly as you thought. Maybe something was protecting you long before you realized you needed protection at all. A few nights ago, you found yourself scrolling through old photos on your phone after midnight, stopping on pictures from a year ago when you thought you had everything figured out. At first you felt sadness. But then something unexpected happened. You noticed how tired your eyes looked even back then. How forced some of those smiles were. How desperately you were trying to hold onto situations that were quietly draining the life out of you. And for the first time, instead of wishing you could go back, you felt something else. Relief. Small, quiet relief. Because maybe losing certain things saved you from becoming someone you were never supposed to become. That realization scared you a little. Because if the closed doors were protection, then it means the waiting season you hate so much might also have a purpose you still cannot fully see. And deep down, part of you already senses it. That is why the silence feels different lately. Not empty. Not abandoned. Just unfinished, like something important is still unfolding beneath the surface while your life sits suspended between who you were and who you are slowly becoming. The hardest battles are the ones nobody else can hear happening inside you. By now, you have become so good at hiding your exhaustion that even the people closest to you probably think you are handling everything just fine. But they do not see what happens after midnight when the apartment finally goes quiet and there is nothing left to distract you from your own thoughts. They do not see you standing at the bathroom sink staring into the mirror wondering why you feel so disconnected from the life you fought so hard to build. Lately, it feels like your emotions have been caught between two worlds. One part of you wants to keep believing that everything will eventually make sense, but another part is tired of waiting for change that never seems to arrive. And that tension has started following you everywhere. At work, you lose focus halfway through conversations because your mind drifts somewhere else. While everyone around you talks about future plans, promotions, vacations, relationships, all you can think about is how emotionally stuck you feel inside your own life. Even simple things drain you now. Answering texts feels overwhelming some days. Returning phone calls feels like work. There are evenings when you sit in your car outside your apartment for 20 minutes scrolling aimlessly through social media, not because you enjoy it, but because walking inside means being alone with your thoughts again. And lately those thoughts have become heavier. You started questioning yourself in ways you never used to. Maybe you waited too long. Maybe you made the wrong decisions. Maybe this season of silence is happening because you somehow failed without realizing it. Those thoughts scare you because they sound convincing at 3 in the morning when the room is dark and your heart feels restless for reasons you cannot explain. Last night was one of those nights. You woke up around 2:17 a.m. after another uneasy dream you could barely remember. The room felt strangely still. Outside your window the streetlights reflected across wet pavement after a late rainstorm, and for a moment you just sat there at the edge of your bed feeling this pressure in your chest that words cannot fully describe. Not panic exactly. More like emotional weight that has been building quietly for months. You tried distracting yourself the way you always do. You opened your phone. Checked old messages. Scrolled through photos. Revisited conversations that ended long ago. But instead of comfort, you felt something else. You realized how much energy you have spent trying to resurrect versions of your life that no longer fit who you are becoming. That realization hit deeper than expected because part of you still misses those old dreams. You miss the certainty you once had. You miss believing everything would happen according to your timeline. But the more you cling to those expectations, the more exhausted you become. Somewhere deep inside, you are beginning to understand that this season is changing you whether you are ready or not. And honestly, that scares you too. Because transformation rarely feels peaceful. While it is happening, it feels confusing, lonely, uncomfortable. It feels like standing in the middle of your own life while familiar things slowly disappear around you before new clarity has fully arrived. But there is something else happening beneath all this emotional tension that you still have not fully recognized. Every delay, every interruption, every closed door has also been pulling you away from places and people that would have slowly emptied you completely. You just could not see it at the time because you were too busy grieving what you thought you lost. There comes a moment in every difficult season when exhaustion stops feeling temporary and starts feeling personal. That is where you have been lately. You wake up carrying emotional weight before the day even begins, and no matter how many times you tell yourself to stay positive, something inside you keeps slipping back into that quiet sadness you cannot fully explain to anyone else. It is not only disappointment anymore. It is deeper than that now. It is the feeling of slowly losing connection with the version of yourself that used to feel hopeful about the future. You still remember how certain you once were. You remember believing that if you worked hard enough, stayed faithful enough, loved deeply enough, eventually life would reward your effort. But instead, so many things unraveled in ways you never expected. And the hardest part is that you never received clear answers for any of it. Just silence. Delays. Distance. Closed doors. You keep trying to move forward, but every step feels emotionally heavy because part of you is still carrying unanswered questions from the past. Last Friday after work, you stopped at the grocery store just before closing time. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead while tired employees stocked shelves for the next morning. You pushed your cart slowly through nearly empty aisles, staring at things without really seeing them, emotionally drained from another long week that felt exactly like the one before it. Then, while standing near the frozen food section, you suddenly noticed an older man smiling gently at his wife as she reached for his hand while they walked together down the aisle. It was such a small moment, but something about it hit you unexpectedly hard. Because for a second, you realized how deeply you miss feeling emotionally safe. Not perfect. Not successful. Just safe. Safe enough to stop carrying everything alone. Safe enough to believe life is not constantly about to disappoint you again. That realization followed you home that night. You sat on your couch with the lights off except for the soft glow coming from the kitchen, listening to rain tap against the windows again while your thoughts spiraled deeper than usual. And for the first time in a long while, you admitted something to yourself that you normally try to avoid. You are tired of pretending the waiting has not changed you. Tired of acting like all these delays and disappointments have not slowly reshaped the way you see yourself. Because they have. Somewhere along the way, you stopped expecting good things to happen naturally. Now every opportunity feels fragile before it even begins. Every new connection feels temporary. Every moment of happiness feels like something you have to brace yourself to lose eventually. And that fear has quietly been controlling more of your life than you realize. But what if the reason everything feels so emotionally intense lately is because you are standing closer to clarity than you think? What if this pressure inside you is not proof that your life is collapsing, but proof that something false is finally being stripped away? Because when you look back honestly, some of the things you begged to keep would have slowly emptied your spirit if they stayed. Some people only loved the version of you that ignored your own needs to keep them comfortable. Some opportunities would have chained you to a future that looked successful on the outside but left you emotionally hollow inside. You just could not see it then because you were too afraid of losing what felt familiar. But now the silence is forcing you to face something uncomfortable. Maybe your greatest loss was never losing those things. Maybe your greatest loss would have been keeping them. You have been standing at the edge of a decision for longer than you realize. Not always a visible decision that other people could point to, but an internal one. The kind that quietly shapes the direction of your life while nobody else notices it happening. For months now, maybe even years, part of you has been trying to return to things your spirit already outgrew. You kept revisiting old versions of yourself because they felt familiar, even when they no longer felt peaceful. And every time life pulled those things away from you, you interpreted it as failure instead of protection. But the pressure inside you has been building because deep down, you know you cannot keep living halfway between who you were and who you are becoming. That tension has followed you everywhere lately. You feel it while driving home in silence after work. You feel it when your phone lights up with messages from people who no longer truly understand you. You feel it during conversations where you smile and nod while internally feeling miles away from everyone around you. It is exhausting pretending everything still fits when your spirit has already started moving in a different direction. 2 nights ago, you almost went backward again. You were sitting alone on your bed around 1:30 in the morning with only the lamp beside you turned on, staring at a message you had typed but not sent yet. You reread it over and over, your thumb hovering over the screen while your chest tightened with emotion. Part of you wanted comfort, familiarity, relief from the loneliness. You convinced yourself maybe reconnecting with that person would finally stop the emptiness you have been carrying. Maybe returning to what once felt safe would make everything hurt less. But something inside you hesitated. Not fear exactly. More like a quiet resistance you could not explain logically. The room felt unusually still. Even the air seemed heavier somehow. And then, almost without thinking, you locked your phone and set it face down beside you. You sat there in silence afterward, frustrated with yourself for not sending the message, confused about why something inside you refused to let you go through with it. At first, you thought you missed your chance again. Another missed connection. Another lost opportunity. But the deeper truth is harder to accept. You are beginning to sense that not every emotional urge deserves your obedience. Sometimes loneliness makes old doors look safer than they really were. Sometimes exhaustion convinces you to return to places that once wounded you simply because the unfamiliar future feels too uncertain. But what if that hesitation you felt was not weakness at all? What if it was protection arriving quietly before you made a decision that would have pulled you backward emotionally? Because the truth is, you almost stepped back into patterns that would have drained you all over again. You almost reopened wounds that took months to close. And maybe that is why everything has felt so emotionally intense lately. You are closer to a turning point than you realize. That is why the pressure feels heavier. That is why the silence feels louder at night. Part of your life is ending internally even before external changes fully appear. And while that process feels lonely, confusing, and deeply uncomfortable, something inside you already knows there is no peace left in becoming who you used to be. The problem is that your heart is still catching up to what your spirit quietly understood long ago. What you are finally beginning to understand is that some of the most important moments in your life did not feel important while they were happening. They felt frustrating, delayed, confusing. They looked like rejection at first. That is why you misread them for so long. You kept thinking life was taking things away from you when, in reality, something deeper was quietly pulling you out of situations your heart was too emotionally attached to leave on its own. And now, little by little, the pattern is starting to reveal itself. Think about all the moments that did not make sense when they happened. The plans that collapsed unexpectedly. The people who disappeared without explanation. The opportunities that slipped away right when you thought everything was finally working out. You cried over those things. You lost sleep over them. You questioned your worth because of them. But if those doors had stayed open, where would your life actually be right now? That question has been following you lately because deep down, you already know the answer scares you a little. Last month, while cleaning out a drawer in your bedroom, you found an old notebook filled with goals and plans you wrote almost 2 years ago. At first you smiled reading through the pages because you remembered how determined you felt back then. But the longer you looked at those words, the more unsettled you became. Because hidden between all those goals was a version of yourself that was constantly sacrificing peace just to feel accepted. You saw how badly you wanted certain people to choose you. How desperately you chased opportunities that looked successful on the outside but secretly left you anxious all the time. You realized you were willing to shrink parts of yourself just to keep certain doors from closing. And suddenly something became painfully clear. If life had given you everything you begged for back then, you would have slowly abandoned yourself completely without even realizing it. That realization sat heavily in your chest for days afterward because it changed the meaning of everything you thought you lost. The silence was not punishment. The delays were not abandonment. The closed doors were not proof you were unworthy. They were interruptions. Interventions. Redirections arriving before you walked too far into places that would have emotionally destroyed your peace over time. That is why certain things fell apart no matter how hard you tried to hold them together. Not because you were unloved, but because some paths only looked good from a distance. Your spirit sensed the danger before your emotions were willing to let go. And maybe that is why life has felt so emotionally intense lately. You are finally standing close enough to the truth to see your past differently. The loneliness. The waiting. The confusion. Even the silence at night when you felt forgotten. None of it was empty after all. Something was quietly protecting you in ways you could not understand while you were living through it. A few evenings ago, while driving home just after sunset, traffic slowed to a stop beneath fading orange. Light stretching across the highway. Normally moments like that irritate you, but this time something felt different. You looked out the window at the stillness around you and suddenly realized how much calmer your spirit has become compared to a few months ago. Not healed completely. Not fully certain about the future. But calmer. Less desperate. Less willing to chase things that cost your peace. And for the first time in a long while, you stopped asking why certain doors closed. Instead, a quieter question appeared inside you. What if they closed because your life was meant to become something different than you originally imagined? The strange thing about healing is that it rarely arrives all at once. Most of the time it begins quietly, almost invisibly, through moments you would have overlooked before. A little less panic when your phone stays silent. A little more peace when plans change unexpectedly. A growing awareness that you no longer want to force things that cost you your emotional stability just to avoid being alone. And lately, those small shifts inside you have started becoming impossible to ignore. You still have difficult nights. You still wake up sometimes with that familiar heaviness sitting in your chest before the day even begins. But something about the way you carry it has changed. A few months ago, every disappointment felt personal. Every delay felt like rejection. Every closed door felt like proof that something was wrong with you. Now, even though the questions have not fully disappeared, you are beginning to notice another feeling underneath them. Trust. Not loud certainty. Not complete understanding. Just a quiet sense that maybe your life is not falling apart as randomly as you once believed. Yesterday morning, while getting ready for work, you caught yourself standing by the window longer than usual watching sunlight slowly spread across the parking lot below your apartment. Cars pulled out one by one while people hurried into another busy day, but for some reason you stayed still, coffee warming your hands while everything around you moved quickly. And in that moment, something unexpected crossed your mind. You realized how much of your life you spent rushing toward things that were never truly aligned with your peace. Relationships that required you to constantly overextend yourself just to feel chosen. Opportunities that looked impressive but left you emotionally drained. Versions of success that demanded you abandon your own needs to keep up appearances. You called it ambition back then. Loyalty. Persistence. But deep down, your spirit was exhausted long before your life finally slowed down enough for you to notice it. That is why the silence had to happen. Not to punish you, but to separate you from the noise you mistook for purpose. Because if everything had continued moving at the speed you wanted, you never would have stopped long enough to see what was quietly damaging you beneath the surface. And honestly, that truth is difficult to accept. It means some of the things you cried over were never truly meant to stay. It means some prayers went unanswered because answering them would have led you farther away from yourself. It means the loneliness you feared so much may have actually protected you from remaining emotionally attached to people who only love parts of you that benefited them. You see it now in ways you could not before. The constant exhaustion. The anxiety that followed certain conversations. The heaviness that entered your spirit every time you forced yourself to remain in spaces that no longer felt right. Back then you ignored those feelings because you were afraid to disappoint people. Afraid to lose progress. Afraid that walking away would mean starting over. But now you are beginning to understand something important. Peace does not always arrive by gaining more. Sometimes it arrives by finally releasing what your spirit was never meant to carry forever. Last night, while folding laundry in the quiet of your apartment, music playing softly in the background, you realized you had gone almost an entire evening without replaying old memories in your mind. That might sound small to someone else, but for you it meant everything. Because for the first time in a very long while, your thoughts were not trapped in the past. They were finally beginning to loosen their grip on who you used to be. And maybe that is the clearest sign yet that something inside you is truly changing. You are starting to notice things now that you were too emotionally overwhelmed to recognize before. Not dramatic signs. Not sudden miracles. Just quiet shifts inside yourself that feel almost unfamiliar after carrying so much heaviness for so long. You respond differently to silence now. A few months ago, silence made you panic. It made you feel forgotten, abandoned, unwanted. Every unanswered message felt personal. Every delay made your mind spiral into fear that life was leaving you behind. But lately, something inside you has become quieter too. Not because all the pain disappeared, but because you are finally beginning to understand that not every empty space in your life was meant to be filled immediately. Some spaces were created so you could hear yourself again after years of drowning in noise that never truly belonged to you. Earlier this week, you stopped by a small coffee shop on your way home after work. Nothing special about it. Just a quiet place tucked between a laundromat and an old bookstore you usually drive past without noticing. You sat near the window with your coffee cooling beside you while people moved through the evening outside under soft streetlights and fading clouds. And for the first time in a very long while, you did not feel the need to distract yourself from your own thoughts. You simply sat there in stillness. No scrolling through old conversations. No replaying regrets. No searching for signs that someone missed you. Just quiet. And what surprised you most was not the silence around you. It was the peace inside it. That moment stayed with you afterward because it revealed something important. You are no longer the same person who spent every night desperately trying to force answers out of situations that were already fading from your life. Back then, you chased clarity because uncertainty terrified you. You thought if you could just understand why things fell apart, maybe the pain would finally stop. But now you are slowly realizing that some answers only arrive after distance. After stillness. After enough time passes for your spirit to see clearly what your emotions once refused to accept. That is why certain memories no longer hurt the same way they used to. You are beginning to see people for who they actually were instead of who you hoped they would become. You are beginning to recognize how often you ignored your own exhaustion just to keep relationships alive that only survived when you abandoned yourself inside them. And perhaps the hardest truth of all is realizing how many times your spirit tried to warn you before life finally forced things to end. The anxiety you felt around certain people. The heaviness that followed certain conversations. The constant emotional confusion you kept trying to rationalize away because you were afraid of losing connection. But peace does not require you to betray yourself in order to keep it. That is something you understand now in ways you never could before. Last night, while walking from your car to your apartment beneath cold evening air and distant traffic sounds, you suddenly remembered the version of yourself from a year ago. The version that felt constantly afraid of being left behind. And standing there beneath the dim parking lot lights, keys in your hand, you realized something quietly powerful. You survived losing the things you thought would destroy you. Not perfectly. Not without scars. But you survived. And maybe the reason your spirit feels calmer lately is because part of you finally understands that what truly belongs in your life will never require you to lose yourself just to keep it there. That realization did not arrive through force. It arrived slowly through silence, loneliness, waiting, and all the painful moments you once believed were meaningless. But now you are beginning to see they were shaping something inside you all along. There is a version of you that existed before all the disappointment, before the unanswered questions, before the long nights spent wondering why life kept pulling things away from you. And lately, it feels like that version of you has slowly started breathing again beneath all the emotional exhaustion you carried for so long. Not loudly. Not perfectly. But enough for you to notice. Enough for you to realize you are no longer living from the same desperation that once controlled your decisions. You still remember how intense everything used to feel. Every delay felt unbearable. Every silence felt personal. You were constantly trying to hold your life together with fear disguised as control. If someone pulled away, you chased clarity. If a door closed, you blamed yourself. If life slowed down unexpectedly, your mind immediately assumed something was wrong. But now, after everything you have lived through, something inside you has changed in a quieter way. You are starting to understand that peace is not the absence of uncertainty. Peace is learning that uncertainty does not automatically mean disaster. Earlier this afternoon, while driving home beneath gray skies and soft rain drifting across the windshield, you passed a small park filled with nearly bare trees swaying gently in the cold wind. And for reasons you could not explain, you suddenly slowed down and looked at them longer than usual. Nothing about the scene was dramatic. No voice. No sign. Just stillness. But something about those trees standing quietly through another changing season reminded you of your own life. They were not fighting the transition. They were not panicking because old leaves had fallen away. They simply stood there, rooted, trusting that what looked empty now would not stay empty forever. That thought stayed with you because deep down, you know your life has been in a season of shedding too. Old expectations. Old attachments. Old fears. Old versions of yourself that survived through overthinking, people-pleasing, emotional chasing, and constantly seeking validation from places that could never truly give you peace. And maybe that is why this season felt so painful at first. Because growth rarely feels comforting when it begins by removing the things you once depended on emotionally. You thought losing those things meant you were being abandoned. But now you can see how much of your anxiety came from trying to force yourself into places where your spirit never fully rested. Some relationships only survived because you ignored your own emotional needs to keep them alive. Some opportunities looked successful while quietly pulling you farther away from yourself. And the silence you hated so much was the very thing that finally slowed you down enough to recognize it. Last night, while making dinner in your quiet apartment, you noticed something small but important. The silence no longer felt empty the way it once did. A few months ago, quiet evenings made your mind spiral into loneliness and regret. But now, standing there beneath warm kitchen light while rain tapped softly against the windows again, you realized you were not afraid of your own company anymore. That realization almost brought tears to your eyes because you finally understood something your spirit has been trying to teach you through all this waiting. You were never meant to build your entire sense of worth around being chosen by people, opportunities, or outcomes that constantly made you feel emotionally unstable. Your peace was never supposed to depend on things that disappeared the moment life became uncertain. And perhaps that is why the delays happened. Not to keep love, success, or happiness from you, but to separate you from the fear that made you believe you had to earn those things by abandoning yourself first. You are beginning to realize that healing is not always loud. Sometimes it happens so quietly that you almost miss it while looking for bigger signs that your life is changing. It happens in ordinary moments. In the way your chest no longer tightens every time your phone stays silent. In the way you stop replaying certain memories before falling asleep. In the way you finally allow some unanswered questions to exist without forcing yourself to solve them before you can feel peace again. And maybe the clearest sign of all is this. You are no longer chasing what once chased your peace away. A few days ago, you woke up earlier than usual just before sunrise. The apartment was still dark except for pale blue morning light slowly appearing through the blinds. Normally you would grab your phone immediately, searching for distractions before your thoughts could catch up with you. But this time you stayed still for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and distant traffic beginning outside. And in that silence, something felt different. Not exciting. Not dramatic. Just gentle. Like your spirit was finally learning how to rest again after surviving too many months in emotional survival mode. You thought healing would feel like becoming someone entirely new overnight. But instead, it feels more like slowly returning to yourself after being emotionally lost for a very long time. That is why some things no longer affect you the way they once did. Certain people still cross your mind, but the desperation attached to them has faded. Some old dreams still ache a little, but they no longer define your worth. Even the waiting feels different now. It still hurts sometimes, but it no longer feels empty. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped viewing your life as something that failed to happen on schedule. You began seeing it as something still unfolding beyond your limited understanding. Last weekend, while cleaning your apartment, you found an old receipt folded inside a jacket pocket from a restaurant you had not visited in over a year. You immediately remembered the night connected to it. The anxiety you carried back then. The way you sat across from someone trying to convince yourself everything was fine even while your spirit quietly begged for peace. And standing there holding that faded piece of paper beneath soft afternoon light, you realized something that almost stopped you in place. You do not miss who you were during that season. You miss the hope you attached to it. There is a difference. Because the truth is, some versions of your life only felt beautiful because you were terrified of losing them, not because they truly brought you peace. That realization changed something deep inside you. It helped you understand why certain endings felt so devastating at first. You were not only grieving people, plans, or opportunities. You were grieving the future you imagined those things would give you. But now, after all the waiting, silence, confusion, and emotional unraveling, your spirit is finally beginning to trust something greater than your own expectations. Not perfectly. Not every day. But enough to loosen your grip on what no longer belongs in your life. And maybe that is what this entire season was trying to teach you all along. That peace does not arrive when everything finally goes according to your plans. Sometimes peace arrives when you stop needing your old plans to survive emotionally. Sometimes the delays save you from futures your heart wanted but your spirit would never have survived comfortably inside. And now, standing quietly in the middle of a life that still feels unfinished, you are beginning to understand something you once could not accept. Not everything broken needed to be repaired. Some things ended because your soul was finally ready to outgrow them. Maybe this season was never about getting everything you wanted. Maybe it was about becoming someone who no longer needed to destroy their own peace just to feel worthy of love, success, or belonging. And when you look back now, you can finally see how quietly your life has been changing beneath the surface this entire time. Not through dramatic moments. Not through instant answers. But through small shifts that slowly taught your spirit how to breathe again. You still have questions about the future sometimes. There are still nights when uncertainty creeps back in and tries to convince you that you are behind in life. But those thoughts no longer control you the way they once did. Because something inside you finally understands that being delayed is not the same as being forgotten. A year ago, silence made you feel abandoned. Now silence sometimes feels protective. A year ago, closed doors made you panic. Now part of you wonders what they quietly saved you from. That change did not happen overnight. It came through loneliness. Through waiting. Through sitting alone in your apartment after long days, hearing nothing except the sound of rain against the windows and your own thoughts finally becoming impossible to outrun. It came through moments where you almost went backward emotionally but felt something inside you gently refused to let you settle for old patterns anymore. It came through realizing how often your spirit felt uneasy in places your fear kept calling home. Tonight, as you move through another ordinary evening, there is no dramatic ending waiting for you. No sudden voice explaining every painful thing that happened. The dishes still sit in the sink. The city lights still glow outside your window. Your future is still unfolding one quiet day at a time. But something about you is different now. You no longer feel the same desperation to force answers before their time. You no longer feel the same need to chase people who only gave you temporary reassurance while slowly draining your peace underneath it. Somewhere between all the waiting and all the silence, your spirit finally learned that not every ending is meant to be reversed. Some endings exist to return you to yourself. Earlier this evening, while walking slowly from your mailbox back toward your apartment beneath cool night air, you noticed how calm everything felt around you. Cars passing in the distance. Porch lights glowing softly across nearby buildings. The sound of wind moving gently through trees that had already survived another changing season. And standing there for a moment with your keys in your hand, you realized something quietly beautiful. Your life does not need to look perfect right now for healing to be real. Things are still unfolding. Some prayers are still unanswered. Some dreams still feel uncertain. But your spirit no longer feels trapped in survival mode the way it once did. There is space inside you again. Space for peace. Space for clarity. Space for a future that no longer needs to be forced into existence through fear. And maybe that is what all of this was leading you toward from the very beginning. Not punishment. Not abandonment. Just a slow and painful redirection away from everything that could never truly hold the version of you that is finally beginning to emerge now. So if life has felt unusually heavy lately, maybe it is not because everything is falling apart. Maybe it is because something inside you has been waking up quietly this whole time, guiding you away from what no longer belongs with you and toward a peace you could not recognize until the noise finally faded.